He set the divorce papers on the kitchen table on a Sunday afternoon and placed a pen beside them like he was doing me a favor. Then he looked at me and said, "Sign the papers or I'll make this ugly, Ada. You'll walk away with the debts and nothing else." I looked at the papers. I looked at the pen. I thought about a document I had recorded at the Sacramento County Recorder's Office in March of 2018, 2 months before I married him, that had his name on nothing. I said, "I'll need to call my attorney." He smiled. It was the last time he smiled in that kitchen. Good day, dear listeners. It's Lena again, and I'm so glad you're here with me today. Before we begin, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel and tap the like button. It helps these stories reach the people who need them. And tell me in the comments which city you're listening from. I love seeing just how far these stories travel. People always say that home is where the heart is, which sounds like warmth, but is, in a dissolution proceeding, a question of recorded instruments and chain of title. I had spent 16 years appraising residential properties for Sacramento County, classifying ownership records for tax purposes, reading title abstracts the way other people read newspapers. I knew that a deed is a fact. I knew that a properly recorded trust is a fact. And I knew, with the particular precision of someone who reads these documents professionally, that Philip's name was nowhere in either one. My name is Ada Kowalski, and I was 43 years old when Philip put those papers on the table. I am a certified property tax assessor for Sacramento County, and I have been assessing residential properties and reviewing ownership records for 16 years. Do you know that feeling, dear listeners, of understanding something professionally for years, and then having that exact knowledge become the most personally relevant thing you have ever known? That is what divorce was for me. Not a surprise, not a crisis. A process I had been trained to navigate and had, without fully admitting it to myself, been preparing for. I bought the Sacramento Craftsman bungalow in October of 2014, alone, on a mortgage I qualified for alone, with a down payment I had saved for 6 years in a separate account I had maintained since my first year at the assessor's office. I refinished the floors myself over a weekend with a rented machine and knee pads I borrowed from my colleague Gideon Reyes. I planted jasmine on the front porch because I wanted the bungalow to smell like something that came back every year, regardless of what else was happening. Philip moved in when we married in 2018. He replaced the deck boards, retiled one bathroom, repainted the exterior in a color I had not chosen. He paid none of the mortgage. His name appeared nowhere in the recorded history of the property. Sacramento in August is white sky heat and dried-out grass and the smell of the valley pressing in, the kind of heat that makes everything feel like a decision. In March of 2018, 2 months before the wedding, I had transferred the bungalow into a revocable living trust, Ada Kowalski, sole trustee and sole beneficiary, at the Sacramento County Recorder's Office. My colleague Gideon had done the same thing a year earlier and had suggested it as basic estate planning. He called it the most sensible thing he had done in his personal financial life. I agreed and followed his example. I told Philip about the trust during a conversation with our financial planner. Philip had been looking at his phone during the estate section of that meeting. He had not asked about it afterward. He had not found it interesting. The first warning sign was behavioral. In the last year of the marriage, Philip had begun asking me, with increasing focus, about the bungalow's current assessed value. Not as casual conversation, as targeted inquiry, the curiosity of someone who is trying to establish a number. He asked twice. I gave him the county's assessed value, which is a different thing from market value in ways that a property tax assessor understands, and a contractor does not necessarily. He wrote down the number. I noted that he wrote it down. The second warning was documentary. A letter from a Sacramento family law attorney arrived at our house, addressed to Philip at his contractor's office address, forwarded to the house by mistake. The envelope had the law firm's return address visible through the clear window. I saw the subject line. I photographed the sealed envelope. Then I resealed it and forwarded it. That was 3 months before the Sunday afternoon with the papers and the pen. Philip had printed the filing himself, a standard Sacramento County dissolution form, organized with tabs, clearly prepared with professional assistance. He put it on the table with the deliberateness of someone who has rehearsed the gesture. He sat across from me and placed the pen beside it and said, "Sign the papers, or I'll make this ugly, Ada. You'll walk away with the debts and nothing else." I picked up the pen. I looked at it. I set it back down. I said, "I'll need to call my attorney first, Philip." He said, "Sure, but read page 12 before you do." I said, "I'm familiar with dissolution filings." I stood up, picked up my phone, and walked out to my car. The jasmine was blooming on the front porch. It bloomed every year whether anyone was watching or not. Page 12 was the asset schedule. Philip's attorney had listed the bungalow as a community asset subject to equitable division, valued at Philip's informal estimate, $820,000. There was a notation attributing significant improvement contributions to Philip during the marriage. It was competently formatted. It was wrong on every material point. I sat in my car and called Gideon first. He listened for 2 minutes and said, "You did it right, Ada. Exactly what I told you." I called Luz Navarro next. Luz was my family law and property attorney, a Sacramento practitioner who specialized in California separate property disputes. She was efficient and direct, with the manner of someone who charges by the hour and considers your time worth respecting. She had my file within 24 hours. The chain of title from the Sacramento County Recorder's Office was exactly what I knew it to be. The 2014 grant deed in my name alone. The 2018 trust transfer recorded 8 weeks before the wedding. Philip's name did not appear. His alleged improvement contributions, documented by his own contractor records, which Luz subpoenaed, amounted to approximately $14,000 in materials and labor over 6 years. California case law was consistent. Routine homeowner maintenance by a resident does not create an equitable ownership interest in a separately titled property. Luz sent Philip's attorney a 15-page response with the title abstract, the trust instrument, and the relevant case citations. Philip's attorney was quiet for a week. Then he filed a supplemental declaration, arguing that Philip's financial contributions to household expenses during the marriage had created a community property interest in the home's appreciation. Luz responded, "The mortgage had always been in my name only. Household expense contributions by a non-titled resident spouse do not convert separate property to community property under California Family Code Section 760. She attached Philip's bank records, which showed his household contributions clearly, and showed also clearly no mortgage payments among them. Philip called me twice during the week of his attorney's review. I did not answer. On the second voicemail, his voice had changed. The confident tone that had placed the papers on the table was gone. He said, "Ada, I think we need to talk." I called Luz instead and told her I would accept a settlement conference. The settlement conference was held in a mediation office on Capitol Mall, the Sacramento River visible through tinted glass, the air conditioning a relief after the August heat. Philip's attorney presented a revised position. Philip would waive his claim to the bungalow in exchange for a larger share of the joint accounts. Luz and I had anticipated this and had agreed on a number beforehand. The mediation took 90 minutes. At the end of it, the bungalow was confirmed as my separate property, and the joint accounts were divided by an agreed formula. Philip signed. He did not look at me while he signed. He stood, and his attorney said something brief and professional. Philip walked to the door of the conference room and stopped, the door half open, the hallway beyond visible. He looked back at the title abstract on the table, the one with his name on nothing. He did not look at me. He looked away first. Then the door closed. The dissolution was finalized in November. I had the bungalow to myself, which I had, technically and legally, always had to myself. The jasmine on the front porch finished its summer bloom and went quiet for fall, the way jasmine does, pulling inward, resting, waiting for the following May. I spent a Saturday in December repainting the kitchen in the color I had wanted since I bought the house, and had never gotten around to choosing. The paint cost $32. I did the work myself. I opened every window in the kitchen and let the December air in while I painted, and the smell of fresh paint and cold air was the specific smell of something beginning again. The bungalow's value at the time of the dissolution was approximately $870,000. My equity, measured against the down payment I had made alone in 2014, was $640,000. The accumulated return on 6 years of mortgage payments and one carefully maintained separate property trust. Philip received none of it. He received his share of the joint accounts, which was fair and which I had always been willing to accept. He received the deck boards he had replaced and the bathroom tile he had laid and the exterior paint in the color he had chosen. I kept the jasmine. I kept the kitchen. I kept the house. Philip filed for a studio apartment in Midtown Sacramento after the mediation. I learned this from a mutual acquaintance and noted it without commentary. His contractor's license, last I knew, was still active. He builds things. He does not own them. What I want you to understand, dear listeners, the thing I most want you to take from this story is that the work I did before the storm was not motivated by distrust. When I recorded the trust in March of 2018, I was 39 years old and I was about to marry someone I believed I loved. And I was also a professional who understood what property law says about the difference between belief and record. Both of those things were true simultaneously. A deed is a fact. A trust is a record. The paperwork you do before the storm is the shelter that holds during it. Do the quiet work now. Let the documents speak for you later. What would you have done when he put those papers on the table, signed them, or walked out to the jasmine? Tell me in the comments. Share this story with someone who might need it. Thank you for being here. Let me tell you more about the weeks between that Sunday and the mediation, because the shape of the case matters, and so does the shape of what I was carrying. Gideon Reyes had been my colleague at the assessor's office for 11 years by the time Philip put those papers on the table. He was 51, gray-haired, with the careful precision of a man who had spent decades classifying properties for tax purposes and had come to believe that most human problems were, at their root, problems of classification. He had recommended the living trust approach after his own divorce 4 years earlier, had described it as the single most useful thing he had done in his personal financial life, and had pressed the name of his property attorney on me with the specific enthusiasm of someone who wants to share a discovery. I had followed his advice without fully believing, at the time, that I would ever need to. When I called him that Sunday evening from my car in the driveway, I heard him pause, and then I heard something I recognized as the particular satisfaction of a man whose advice has been vindicated. He said, "You did it right, Ada. Exactly what I told you." He paused again. He said, "Do you need anything else from me?" I said I didn't think so. He said, "Call me if you do." That was the end of the call. That is the kind of support that is actually supportive, the kind that confirms the foundation is solid, and then gets out of the way. Luz Navarro's office was in a building near the Capitol. I met her for the first time the Monday after the Sunday with the papers. She was brisk and well-prepared and made no unnecessary observations about the situation. She had pulled the Sacramento County Recorder records before I arrived, which told me everything I needed to know about how she worked. She had a printout of the chain of title on the table when I sat down. She asked me 3 questions. I answered them. She said, "Philip's attorney is going to argue improvement contributions. He'll lose that argument. Then he'll argue household expense contributions create an equitable interest. He'll lose that argument too. Then he'll want to settle." She was right about all 3 things, in the order she named them. Philip's attorney made his first move within 10 days of Luz's response, the supplemental declaration about household expense contributions. Luz replied within 72 hours. The reply was 5 paragraphs and 1 set of financial records, and it was sufficient. Philip's attorney took 5 days to respond, which Luz told me was not the pace of a man who has a strong case. When he finally called her, he asked about a settlement framework in the second sentence of the call. I want to tell you about the property itself, dear listeners, because the bungalow is the protagonist of this story as much as I am. I had chosen the Craftsman neighborhood in Sacramento because I had spent my first 3 years at the assessor's office appraising properties in that grid of streets and had come to understand its particular stability, the quality of the structure, the size of the lots, the established trees that kept the summer heat manageable. I had evaluated the bungalow twice as part of my county assessor work before I ever considered buying it. I knew its square footage and its assessed value, and its maintenance history from the public record. When it came to market in 2014, I recognized it immediately. I put in an offer the day it was listed. The jasmine I planted on the front porch in the spring of 2016 was a Confederate jasmine, technically a different variety from the climbing jasmine, but fragrant in the same way, white-flowered, persistent. It had taken 2 years to establish itself properly on the porch trellis, and then had never failed to bloom. In the July after the dissolution was finalized, I sat on the porch in the evening with a glass of water and the jasmine fully open around me, and I thought, this is what I came here for. Not the financial outcome, not the legal victory, this specific porch, this specific smell, this specific evening light on the craftsman shingles. I had protected it not because I had expected to need to, but because protecting things that matter is a practice, not a response to emergency. Philip's improvement contributions, when Luz received his contractor records, were precisely as I had estimated. $14,200 in documented materials and labor. A deck resurfacing, bathroom tile, exterior paint. He had worked on the house on weekends, competently, with the specific competence of a man who knows what he is doing and expects recognition for it. He was a good contractor. He was not an owner. The settlement conference was the most efficient 90 minutes I had spent in a professional context that year. Philip's attorney presented the revised position. Luz and I accepted it within the parameters we had agreed on beforehand. The mediator processed the paperwork. Philip signed without speaking. He stood and gathered his things, and his attorney gathered his things, and they left together. Philip slightly ahead, the door closing behind him with the ordinary sound of a door closing. I sat for another 2 minutes after they were gone, looking at the Sacramento River through the tinted glass, the water brown and slow in the August heat. Then I thanked Luz, put on my coat, and took the elevator down to the street, where the August air hit me like a decision. Gideon and I had lunch the following week. He asked me how it had gone. I told him it had resolved in mediation. He nodded. He said, "I told you the trust would work." I said, "You did." He ordered the soup. We talked about a property classification dispute on a commercial parcel in Rancho Cordova that was consuming his Wednesday afternoons. That was all. That is the kind of conversation that constitutes a friendship of 11 years, and it is enough. The jasmine bloomed again the following May, and the May after that. It blooms every year, regardless of what is happening in the rooms behind it. Be patient. Record what matters. Let the instruments do their work. That is the whole lesson. That is everything my 16 years in this profession has taught me, and everything this particular year of my life confirmed. Drop your city in the comments and tell me, have you ever had a document save you something you would not have been able to save any other way? I want to hear from you. Thank you for being here tonight. There is one more thing worth telling you, dear listeners, about the property itself and what I knew about it before Philip ever moved in. In the 3 years before I purchased the bungalow, I had assessed it twice as part of my routine county assessor work. I knew its square footage to the foot. I knew its tax classification, its assessed value history, the year the foundation had been re-poured, the permit history on every improvement made since 1987. I had walked through it twice in a professional capacity, clipboard in hand, and had made the standard notations. Both times I had noted, in the margin of my assessment form, well-maintained original structure, strong bones. Both times I had moved on to the next property on my route. When it came to market in 2014, I recognized the address immediately. I called the listing agent before the open house. I made an offer that afternoon. The agent asked if I had seen the property. I said I had assessed it professionally twice and believed I understood it well. He laughed. He thought I was joking. I was not joking. I knew exactly what I was buying. That is the cleanest version of what I can tell you about myself. I have always known exactly what I was buying, and I have never purchased anything I had not assessed properly first. Philip was a good man in many of the ways that matter. He was also someone who moved through the world on assumption rather than documentation, and the two approaches are not equally reliable. I had married someone who trusted instinct over record, and I had protected myself with record before he ever arrived. The record held. It always does.